I've quoted the figure, and welcome to you, that the pink economy is worth something in the region of 152 billion rand. That's a lot of money.
That is, and that figure I think dates back to around about 2016, so since then it should only have grown.
So are marketers themselves, brands themselves, necessarily taking this particular demographic seriously enough?
Well, I would say yes and no. It's actually quite a tricky question in that we're already starting to see pushback in terms of the corporatization of pride marches, for example. So there's actually some reactionary pride marches in places like the United States against people within the community saying that their marches and their community had been overrun by corporate cynicism.
So brands saying, well, we feel we should take this demographic seriously, therefore let's throw as much resource as possible, but it's not necessarily out of, maybe the sentiment, the intention is wrong.
Correct. So it would be a case of like brand wagoning or pink washing or rainbow washing. These are all terms to speak of corporate cynically trying to jump onto the bandwagon of a community that's really thriving and growing across the world.
So Bronwyn Williams, are we seeing that in this country?
I would say we're probably starting to, but South Africa is still a very conservative society, and as much as this is a very big demographic, it's not a fringe demographic anymore. In fact, JWT did some research and they showed that Gen Z, those would be like the born-free generation here in South Africa, 48% of Gen Zs don't identify as cisgender or heterosexual. So it's not a fringe minority group anymore, but we still tend to think of it in that way.
But you can't blame brands themselves. All they're simply doing is seeing a commercial opportunity, and it is in their interests to exploit, to service that community, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's completely correct. But I think one of the macro trends we're seeing with consumer tribes, any sort of tribe across the world, not just with this particular community, but with any sort of tribe or identified group, is we're seeing people are starting to ask questions, not just a case of are you slapping our logo onto your product. You know, if you've got a rainbow cup at your fast food chain, that doesn't necessarily mean you're an ally. And people are starting to ask questions about, are you taking a hard stance, or are you just doing this to sort of cash in on a community that we've developed? And there's quite a big difference between a brand putting skin in the game and a brand just trying to cash in on someone else's community, one of brand identity.
So a community with huge disposable income.
Absolutely.
What is that money being spent on?
Well, it's been spent on pretty much everything. As I said, this is not a fringe community anymore.
I understand that, but it's also, it would be, surely there would be a preponderance towards maybe higher end, more expensive goods because of that disposable income quotient.
Well, yes, the disposable income quotient is higher in this community, given that there's probably less children in those families, that you tend to have higher earning potential, double income salaries without all those dependents that you'd necessarily find in a traditional, maybe heterosexual relationship. So there is a bit more disposable income. You also find that the pet economy is an itinerary economy that we've seen growing.
Pet economy.
The pet economy, yes. Pets.com might have been a disaster in the early .com bubble days, but the pets economy has blossomed into a huge growing industry across the world. So that's one place that people are spending a bit of extra cash. And you also find that this demographic is also into things like travel and affluent activities, like going to restaurants and going out and enjoying those sort of finer things in life.
Is there a different marketing approach then that brands need to take in order to address this particular community?
I would say probably not. I'd say probably treat people the way you treat anyone else.
Fair point, but you know, the tonality, the copywriting, the messaging, the strategy behind it, would that be different?
I think that it's more than just a strategy and copywriting issue. I think it's a case that if you're going to commit to trying to tap into or associate with this demographic, you have to live your message. You can't just slap the branding on your advertising campaign. You have to make sure that your employment process is diverse and it is committed to diversity and it's not discriminatory in any way.
What does living the message mean?
Living the message means don't say one thing and do another. So don't have discriminatory policies in the boardroom, and don't look down on people when you're talking to them within the office, the confines of your office space.
And on the other hand, have a stand at Gay Pride in Sandton today while you're doing all the other stuff.
Exactly.
So it's a question
you will get caught out if you're not following through. I mean, even just coming down to the sort of companies that are putting branded merchandise into these pride marches, people are asking questions about, wait a minute, what country was that branded T-shirt made in? Was it made in a country where, say, being gay is still a capital offense? In which case, that's a cynical strategy and you are going to get caught out. And I think that's the big message for brands today. You can't be cynical about these things. You have to commit to whatever cause you have all the way through your organization.
Just a quick one in conclusion. The pink economy, of course, is always going to be predicated on tolerance in any market, tolerance from the brands, as we've been discussing, but also tolerance from the broader population. We've kind of got that in this country, haven't you, with I would imagine, pockets of disaffection.
Yes, I would say so. We've got a good constitution. So constitutionally speaking, yes, we do have these protections, but when it comes down to real society, we still have very big issues, like the case of suicide and mental illnesses within this group, due a lot to the fact that society is quite conservative and society doesn't necessarily live up to the values that we've upheld in our constitution.
Thanks for popping in on the Saturday morning.
Thank you.
Okay, Bronwyn Williams with a Trend Translator.